UN environment, to set up for us some of the expectations, the work that's gotten us here, the agenda of this year's Environment Assembly, and then hopefully also be able to take some of your questions. I'm very conscious of time. I know His Excellency the Minister has back-to-back commitments, so we will begin with him and then also excuse him, but then we will have Eric and Ligia with us for questions and answers as well, time permitting. Let me in the first instance then turn to His Excellency the Minister of Environment and Energy, also the President of the Third UN Environment Assembly, Dr. Edgar Gutierrez, for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Dear members of the press, thank you very much for being with us in this Third Assembly of the Environment. And thank you indeed for being interested in the debate in our Assembly. This Assembly has gathered over 2,000 participants from key sectors: government, civil society, science, and the private sector, to exchange experiences on how to tackle pollution and commit to action. Everyone on Earth is affected by pollution, more so those that are in the poor side. My expectations for this Assembly is that as Ministers of Environment, our collective goal is to embrace ways to reduce pollution drastically, to break paradigms, and work in the framework of the new development paradigm set forth in the 2030 Agenda. That we set the enabling conditions to promote that science, business, and policy support these changes in order to improve the well-being and health of our people and our planet. That we build a stronger partnership with civil society, listen to their experiences and knowledge, and broadening the spaces for its participation in the decision-making process at all levels. I am convinced that only through a stronger collective action beginning in Nairobi this week can we start cleaning up the planet globally and save countries' lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, and I know that it's been an incredible year-long journey thanks to your effort to get us here, working around the globe at various fora to sort of level up the ambitions for the Environment Assembly and amplify its expectations and messaging. I appreciate, Minister, that you may need to leave early. Please feel free to be excused at your convenience. Let me now turn to Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Director of UN Environment, Eric Solheim.
Thank you so much, Nelson, and first of all, thank you so much to Edgar Gutierrez, who has really taken the lead in this process up to this Environment Assembly. Without that leadership, we would not have been where we are at the moment. I think we've included everyone, private sector, civil society, media, we have 4,500 people, so a lot more than the governmental delegations. It's 110 governmental delegations with ministers and deputy ministers, so it's a huge turnout for this event. So it's the first time that we have had an Environment Assembly focused on one issue, not claiming that we're doing everything, but really doing one thing, which is putting the fight against pollution, the vision of a pollution-free planet, front and center. What we need to do is to uplift this to an issue which prime ministers, president, business leaders, civil society activists, all on the planet really see as critical for our future. And we are rapidly moving in that direction. There is a lot of progress to be reported. This conference will set out the case. 7 million people, or close to 7 million people, are dying from air pollution on planet Earth every year. That's not Edgar's or my figures. This is the figures of the World Health Organization, the most authoritative that we have. If you include all sorts of pollution, we estimate 13 million people die from pollution. This makes pollution the biggest killer on the planet, and we need to defeat it. Added, of course, that there is a huge number of core benefits if we fight pollution. We create any number of jobs, We will drive society in a greener direction. We will have social benefits because in reality the poorer you are, the more you're harmed by pollution on this planet. If you are very rich, you can avoid quite a few of the pollution problems. It's the poor which are mostly harmed. So this is also a social issue, and of course nearly everything we do can you please give me something to curb pollution will also be very helpful for the fight against climate change. If we avoid going into coal, it's fantastic for climate change and fantastic for pollution at the same time. So that's the vision. Then the next level is, what do we do? There is broad global agreement that we need to frontally attack pollution and that we need to march towards a pollution-free planet. What do we do? Governments need to take action, and the good news is we see that action happening now every day. Let me pay tribute to the government of Kenya, who twice tried to establish a plastic ban in Kenya. Twice they failed. They learned from the mistakes and said, how can we now be successful? They studied it and then came forward with solutions, and the vast majority of Kenyans are following, and we see the results immediately. I was in Masai Mara 2 days before, and people there told me we see even here in Masai Mara immediate results. There is much less plastic flagging around in the national park. But of course Kenya is not alone. Rwanda has done the same, Eritrea here in Africa, Indonesia is rapidly stepping up to fight against plastic pollution, and other governments are acting. Kenya, France, United Kingdom, so many others. I know that you are also embarking upon this in Costa Rica. Private sector need to step up. Some of the biggest companies in the world have pledged that they will act. Danone and Nestlé just announced that by 2020 all their bottles will be made from renewable biomass, which can degenerate in nature, so there is no plastic problem even if the plastic bottles are coming out in nature. We have partnered with a huge number of companies working on this, and at the end of the day we'll also try to partner with the plastic industry to see how we can drive change into better products. Of course the same applies to air quality and air pollution. We need to partner with the private sector to get the technology which we need. And with all this, we need citizens movement, we need civil society to organize, and we need citizens of the world to put pressure on politicians, on business, and for that matter on the UN to act more urgently. And we see also that citizens' engagement coming up in a number of nations in the world. People who didn't talk about pollution until very recently now do talk about pollution. We see plastics being a huge issue on front page of tabloids, in media coverage of TV channels which traditionally are not very environment friendly. So we see a huge development, and we see key governments like the government of China, government of India, European governments, African governments, Latin American governments, we see them all moving. So there is a lot of positive to be reported. But of course we are just starting this journey. This is not the end, this is the start of the global fight against pollution. But let's aim at a pollution-free planet. Our children and our grandchildren will be very, very gracious to us for doing that.
Thank you very much, Eric, and I appreciate your struggling with a cold. You're not usually this husky, and I hope you the best of health. We've got an exciting few days ahead of us. As Eric has delineated some of the broad ambitions, part of the work of the Secretariat that comprises UN Environment is to bring the science to the table to allow for evidence-informed policy making, to encourage the voluntary commitments expected from all stakeholders. You perhaps heard a bit about this morning, and this will be part of what we will expect coming out of the next few days of the Environment Assembly as well. The Executive Director's report has, I hope, been made made available to all of you. An incredible amount of work went into putting not only that report together, but the background report that is even far more robust. And here to tell us a little bit more about that and about the commitments that that report and its recommendations might engender is Ligia Naronia, the Director of UN Environment's Economy Division. Ligia.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Good afternoon, colleagues. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to take forward what the President and the Executive Director just said. This is for us a moment to build the momentum of change towards a pollution-free planet, as we've heard. This has been a year-long exercise, really starting in January, so almost a year. And it was put together by member states and other stakeholders who very, very clearly wanted this to happen. And obviously, a pollution-free planet will not happen overnight. We will have to work towards it. So what we've done in preparing the papers for UNEA 3 and the Executive Director's report is really to think about how is it that we could put together some ideas that could be discussed by member states and other stakeholders. Now, the science is clear, and you've heard some of the figures bandied around, and I'm just going to repeat some of them. One, that air pollution alone kills 6.5 million people. 600,000 children annually suffer brain damage due to the toxic effects of lead in paint. 58% of diarrheal diseases, very often children, is due to the lack of access to safe water and sanitation. As you know, this is a big problem in the world. Our seas already contain 500 dead zones with too little oxygen to support marine life. Over 80% of the world's wastewater is released into the environment without treatment, and close to 50 million tons of e-waste are produced every year. Friends, this is not just a developing country problem or a developed country problem. It's a global problem. It's to do with our consumption and production practices. That is very, very clear. So if we want to move towards a pollution-free planet, we need to look at what is it that is contributing to this kind of situation. In the course of studying this, and we have here the Executive Director's report, which is a slim report, and we have the background report, all of which are on the web because we have not printed anything except these copies that I'm showing you. And so the background report gives you the details. The short report focuses more on the framework of action that we talk about. What we have there is the costs, and the costs are very clear. The costs to human health, the costs to productivity. For example, we have indoor and outdoor pollution causing about $5 billion in 2015, which is 7.2% of GDP. Chemicals alone, 480 million, of which 0.4% of GDP. Now, if we were to look at it in terms of low productivity from pollution-related diseases, according to the Lancet Commission, between 1.3 to 1.9% of the GDP of low-income countries is affected. 0.61 to 0.82% in low to middle-income countries, and around 53 billion in 2015 in high and upper middle-income countries. So these are big figures, and they're growing, and it needs to be taken into attention. So it's not just a problem of health, it's not just a problem of productivity and implications to the economy, but it's also very much a problem of human rights. The fact that people have a right to live in clean environments, and this is what you've been hearing from the President and from the Executive Director, that everyone has a right to healthy environment, and this is not happening. The same with ecosystems, with the birds and the bees who also have a right to clean environments and cannot become extinct because of what we are doing. So these are some of the issues that we have looked at in the report. We looked at the existing MEAs, the multilateral environmental agreements, and there are many of them, and looked at closely to see why is it that these were not functioning the way we expected them, and why is it that we're already not in a pollution-free planet. And we came up with 6 very clear gaps which any action beyond will have to address. One is a knowledge gap, lack of data, inadequate awareness, information on pollution sources, pathways, and impacts. Implementation gaps because of lack of finances, lack of resources, lack of institutional capacity, lack of political will. Infrastructure to manage it, to control pollution. This is a key point. Infrastructure for monitoring, infrastructure for waste management. Limited leadership from finance and industry, which is what we are trying to address by getting all of the industry and financial sectors on board to start looking at consumption and production practices. Mispricing fossil fuel subsidies, for example, or the invisibility of ecosystem values. We don't value the ecosystem, and therefore it does not come into our decision making. And therefore, when we see how it's being affected and degraded by pollution, then you have a way of thinking about it in national income accounting or even in decision making. And finally, inadequate recognition that every one of our consumer choices have pollution consequences. Everything we do, if we don't think about what is it going to mean in terms of pollution, we have a problem. So we need to become much more conscious as consumers about what is it we can do differently. So, what is this towards a pollution-free planet? What is it we're thinking about? It's a synergistic mix of actions and a system-wide multi-beneficial policy-making approach which builds on the existing environmental goals, including climate change, disaster risks reduction, and the 2020 agenda. Minister, you have to go?
Yeah.
Please, don't worry. I can feel you want to leave. Don't worry. Sorry for that.
Yeah, I could entertain one.
Do you want to take questions? I can come back to this. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you if you could talk just a little bit, please, about what tangibly this conference is meant to come up with. What will we see as a result at the end of this? What decisions must ministers take? Where will those decisions then go, into what process? And what are the most complicated political disagreements that are holding things back? Thank you.
That's not one question. It's about 3 or 4 questions. Perhaps one of the main things that we are going to be accomplishing, I'm crossing the fingers that that's the case, in this assembly, is a political declaration from ministers, commitment from ministers to put it in very bold, to put the ball rolling. We have already many UN entities that have an environmental agenda, and in particular in relation to pollution. But it is up to the United Nations Environment Assembly, having the UN Environment Program as a secretariat, to start aligning all these efforts in order to actually have an impact in our own realities. And I think that is something that we ministers have very much present, and that we pretty much want to accomplish. We are setting forward a set of concerns about different issues: pollution in air, pollution in water, pollution in the oceans. So by doing this, we are setting up at the same time an agenda for the Secretariat, the United Nations Environment Program, to help us as ministers to get together all the important sectors, all the sectors that we have been mentioning, in order for them to start working with us and for the people. At this moment in time, we recognize that we have done, despite the very positive examples as the ones that Eric just mentioned, that we have accomplished in different parts of the world. Looking at the whole, we have done a very bad job taking care of our environment. And the worst part of this is that we have very little room now to make mistakes. Very, very little room to make mistakes. And that is why we need science behind. Science is the means for us, decision makers, to reduce uncertainties. Science is going to provide the ways to go. And then we need people, as Eric was saying, we need people to actually understand those findings from science, to push very hard in order for policymakers to establish the right policies. and for business to understand that business as usual is very bad business, and that we need to start looking at different sort of businesses that really take care of our environment, businesses that really take care of the well-being of our people, and not just profits. That is something that I think has come out very strongly in the talks that we have had so far in the umbrella of the UNEA. And of course, we need also an entity that helps us to embrace all this and engage us all in order to accomplish that agenda, and that is the UN Environment Program. I think there are, of course, the other question that you raised is there are some contentious issues. I mean, we have, countries is a rainbow of thoughts and a rainbow of interest. And what I have appealed to countries is flexibility, understanding, to get consensus on those main issues that we can have as an agenda together. We recognize that for example, my own country could be very much interested in one specific thing, but if the rest of the countries are not interested, okay, let's leave it. Let's find common grounds in order to work together, so we can put, as I said at the beginning, put the ball rolling. I mean, we need to start working very hard in redirecting, as Lilia was saying, our patterns of consumption, and that is going to depend on us, in each individual, and in trying to get a different sort of financial system that actually incentivize the sort of sustainable actions so that people can access new technologies. We have seen here in the expo beautiful things that are being done out there. But the question is a poor community somewhere in the world, in the planet, is able to access that technology. So we have to provide the means for them to actually access that technology in order to reduce the pollution of water, for example, of the aquifers or whatever, So I think the agenda that we are setting forth in this assembly is an agenda that is going to bring alignment, is going to bring pooling efforts and pooling initiatives and pooling interests from different sectors of society, that at the end of the day we are going to have very strong program of work to combat pollution. Should I leave now?
There's a question.
Another question for me? I need to leave?
Do you have the time, Minister?
One more question. One more.
Over here.
Thank you. Eric is my name, and I work for Recycle International. And my main question is in regard to e-waste, since that is my line of focus. What is your response to producers, and in this case I mean private companies who manufacture electronics that are marketed in African markets? In Africa, issues to do with e-waste management is lacking. Yet, e-waste management in developed economies where they are selling their product is well sustainable and well managed. So, moving forward and in regard to pollution free, what is your response to these producers who are operating in Africa where they have been accused of polluting the environment? Thank you. I mean, what is your way forward and the recommendation to these producers, private entities who are marketing their electronics in Africa, yet they don't have sustainable mechanism to address this issue of e-waste, including their consumables? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very important issue indeed. One of the things that we have been talking here among us ministers is the need to break the linear economy. The linear economy means you extract, you produce, you consume, and you dispose. That's the linear. We have to break that. We have to start embracing circular economy. You produce, you design, you use, and you dispose, but then you reuse it. It's a circular economy. And that is something, and this is something that really strikes me, this issue was raised in Rio 1992. The need for having producers to be responsible with their own products. And we're still talking about that issue. And it has become very strong here as an issue, in the need to embrace circular economy. And I think it's going to depend also in ourselves as individuals, what sort of things we would like to consume. I can use now this cellular phone that when it breaks, I have to throw it away. But there are already cellular phones in the market that once it breaks, it can be repaired. And it can be used and used and used, and upgrade without having to buy a new one. So that is the state of mind that we have to achieve, and in order to have that possibility of breaking those paradigms that are making us at this moment in time to produce so much pollution that we are not able to handle at this moment. Thank you, and I'm sorry, I need to go.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you. We will, of course, hope to see the Minister again on Wednesday for the closing press conference. So thank you very much. Ligia, let me just turn back to you to complete before we open for questions and answers.
Okay, so I'm going to be short. I'm going to actually follow up on what the Minister just finished saying, which is that one of the key issues that we are raising is the need for circular economy, circularity in our production practices. So you don't just redesign, but you recover, you reuse, you remanufacture, and you recycle. So these are the three key aspects of what we need to do in all of the things, not just because of the pollution, but because we're going to run short of some of the materials that are required to keep the things going as we need them. And so there is also an interest from the point of view of ensuring this resource security, but also in terms of pollution. But let me come back to what next. So you might have seen in your apps that you have something called voluntary commitments in that. The voluntary commitments is what we've asked business, the industry and civil society, as well as citizens. And you've heard about the pledges, but they've also made commitments to make these commitments. We're trying to, in a way, model ourselves a bit from the good points of the Paris Agreement, which was very much a bottom-up exercise. And so the idea is, if we can get countries, if we can get businesses, we can get civil societies to commit to do something, then going forward, we can plan an action plan based on this. So this is not going to be something which is imposed from above. There are already the multilateral agreements. There's already increased environmental governance. We need more research. We need more science. But we can build a common agenda for change, which is going to take some time because it's towards a pollution-free planet, based on these commitments and based then on what are the gaps that we have identified which require for us to put together some enablers and some strong points to fill the gaps. Mason, I could go forever, so I'll stop now and take the questions.
Thank you very much, Ligia, and there's a lot to go on forever for, I'm sure, but it's all in the report as well. We have a few moments still with Eric, of course, so let me open to questions. I've seen your hand first from earlier.
Thank you. I have a question that today we talk a lot about science, government, and business. Yesterday, some speakers said the technology is affordable and available to combat pollution. The problem is the government should to compare to use this technology. So of these 3 points, that is government, science, and business, which one should be improved urgently, and which one is a key point? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to take a few questions or one at a time? A few. Okay. I had seen the hand here. Moses, just in front here. Just keep your hand up.
Check.
Yeah, I'm Mani Padmajana from IPS. My question is, the Minister spoke about alignment of issues. Today, at least after the Science Policy Forum, what commitments have businesses made, the important ones? Thank you.
Shall we take one more question over there in the right?
Hello, Joy Forster from the German Press Agency. You spoke briefly about plastic waste, and it's, I think, one of the big issues. I was wondering, what would you like to see happen? You know, what kind of decisions and resolutions would you like to see this Assembly to take in terms of plastic waste going into the oceans, and how realistic is a kind of a legal treaty to ban plastic waste going into the oceans? Thank you.
Thank you. So let me turn it to Eric.
On science, business and government, we need all three. But obviously government has a key role in driving the change in business. Number one, government everywhere in the world is the biggest purchaser of services from private sector. So the direction which the government takes, it has enormous impact on the private sector. Also, because government need to regulate a number of markets. I can give an example from my nation, Norway. We decided what will it take to introduce electrical mobility much faster in Norway. And then we decided it's a matter of price. We must need to change the price comparison between electrical and gasoline-driven cars, just to make the electrical cars cheaper compared to the gasoline-driven. And secondly, we allowed electrical cars to go in the bus lanes. With these two changes, which is regulate the market, very soon 1/3 of all cars sold in Norway is now electrical. And this is not no cost to the government, it's just regulating the market, because all the cars are made in Japan or in the United States or Germany or other car makers, and soon they will be made in China also for the global market. I mean, so government, if you ask all of the three, government has the key role to regulate the market, science to tell us what we need to do, and business to find the practical, technical solution. We cannot do it without any of the three. Then the other is not really clear exactly what you asked.
What are the alignment of issues?
What business? Sorry.
What commitments have the businesses? Some of them made.
I can take that question.
Okay, please.
So I'm taking this question only because it's up on the website. So if you look at the website, you will find that you have a number of companies there who have we have about 20 companies there, and it's about carbon footprint reduction. It's about improving the sustainability performance. It's about reducing the consumption of lightweight plastic bags, companies that are actually involved in the production of it. Then there's the International Council of Chemicals Association, which is committing to combating pollution by expanding its responsible care program. So if you just go down there, you'll find lots of these examples. It is a beginning. It's a beginning of their engagement in this, and I'm sure there'll be many more as we go forward. Over to you.
On the issue of plastics, the number one issue is to curb plastic at source. Nearly all plastic in the oceans are coming from land, and a lot of them are plastic products we simply don't need. It may seem a very small issue, but straws. Is there a need in society for straw? Can't we drink, as my mother and grandmother did, can't we drink straight from the glass or from the cup? Do we really need the straws? Seems as a small thing, but if you go to Bali, which is of course a prime tourist resort, quite a high percentage of the plastic which are cleaned from the beaches there are straws. Put up a signboard in every restaurant in the world which says, if you absolutely need a straw, we will provide it to you, but we will not hand out straws to anyone who do not ask. That will do the trick. Then, of course, there is a huge amount of the plastic in the supermarket. There is no need. Until very recently, if I went to a supermarket, I just bought the apple or the orange. Do I really need a plastic plate beyond one or two oranges and a plastic around the two oranges to take it home in a plastic bag? There's no need for this. So let's start by simply abolishing where there is no need. Then, of course, there are certain areas where you buy plastic, you can conserve food much longer, so there is a need for a product. But then there is any number of replacement products which we can achieve with the private sector, and this is an area where there has been little innovation. When we look to the big picture of the world, we can make artificial intelligence. We will very soon have self-driven cars all over the planet without a driver. We can cure cancer in many cases through new innovations. We can go to the moon, to the outer space, and we cannot make plastic which degenerate in nature. Does that stand up to scrutiny? Obviously we can. Danone and Nestlé just promised that by 2020 they will make all the bottles just from bioproducts, which is completely degenerate in nature. So stopping the plastic we do not need, then making better products where there is a need, and then of course going into recycling if we cannot stopping, putting a price on plastic so that people collect it and recycle it. All this is possible. All this is just a matter of political leadership, framing the market, and business making better products. And we see a lot of movement. I mean, as you know, Kenya has just introduced a ban on plastic. You see immediate result, immediate positive, and surprisingly to some, huge support. And on many of these issues, when you do it, it's support. I'll give you one final example. We can date on the second when the first nation on planet Earth prohibited smoking in restaurants. I know it because Norway was second, but the first nation was Ireland. That was in the spring of 2004. That's 13 years back. At the time, there were not a lot of support. Most people said it's a human right to be able to smoke wherever you like. Then some changed it, and now it's number one, hard to find a restaurant anywhere on planet Earth where you're allowed to smoke. You have a very hard time wherever you go around, in Germany or Kenya or wherever, to find that restaurant. And adding to that, there is massive support. Nearly everyone's support this ban. And I'm absolutely certain that we can achieve the same on plastic, and 10 years into the future people will ask, why in hell were we so conservative and so old-fashioned rather than to move into one-use plastic-free society?
Thank you. We've got a question here. Let me see if there's any new hands and a question here as well. Just in the front, Moses.
Hi, my name is Sarah. Just a follow-up on the last question. So then would UNEA support legal mechanisms when they say probably all the countries in the world must ban plastic by this time of the year, like we have done with something like ivory, trade in ivory, or would it be necessary looking at its impact on the seas?
Thank you. I still have the same question from the original one. I mean, apart from agreeing that something needs to be done about pollution, which I'm sure nobody disagrees with, what tangibly must come out of this conference? What decisions must be taken, and what will happen to those decisions afterwards? Thank you.
Is there any other question at this point? This will be our final round. We have to get Eric to his next meeting. Otherwise, let me turn to Eric and Ligia.
I think when we look into how we should resolve a present issue, we should always look into how we resolved issues in the past. Because we have resolved huge environment issues, and therefore, when they're resolved, people forget them, because they're resolved. The hole in the ozone layer is coming back. We are not afraid of skin cancer in the way we were when the ozone layer was opening up. Now it's coming back. Why is that? Well, because we as humans were able to step up to the challenge and resolve it. Science told us that we needed to do it. Political leadership framed the market, and business found all the replacement products. Acid rain, as I mentioned this morning, exactly the same. Citizens demanded action. Politicians started regulating markets, and business found the solutions. You can go on. Climate, a lot of the same. For very long, no one thought it was possible to resolve it, but now we see the price of solar and wind energy coming down at a speed no one thought possible, can compete with coal everywhere on the planet for new investment, which makes the case. I mean, in the past, people would say, yes, I know coal is better for your health, and now it's better for the environment, but we have no option because it's so much cheaper. But no, that's not longer the case, and we see a rapid turn into renewables and better energy sources. Exactly the same here. We need to build the case, need to make people enthusiastic, need to work with the private sector to find the solutions, and may encourage governments to regulate markets. I think definitely we should have a discussion about legal bans, what they can achieve, what direction we need to go. We will not get any globally agreed legal bans from this conference, but we may also come to a point where we don't need it, because if the main actors of the world act, and they act because this is a domestic problem. I mean, I was in climate change for so long, and people were discussing how we should convince this or that nation to act. But nations don't work like that. Nations work because it's in their interest, because it's their people, their children, and that's why people are acting. And climate and plastic is now such a scourge everywhere in the world, and it's also coming to a much wider community. I mean, it's not just the environment community, it's just the average man in the street who want to fight plastic, and I'm sure we will move rapidly ahead.
Just to come back to your question, what are we hoping to concretely get out of this? One is the resolutions. You heard this morning and at the end of the session that there are already 9 resolutions, 7 of which are very closely connected to pollution. Now the resolutions provide the mandate to UNEA to do the next thing. So that is very clearly something that we would be doing once these are endorsed by the UNEA. Now, apart from the resolutions are the commitments, as we said. Now, the commitments are made by member states, by businesses, by society. So what we hope to do is to maybe set up a system by which we can connect with them and work with them to ensure that this happens. This is exactly, for example, how the NDCs work, the nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. That's a model that we would adopt to take this forward. And the third would be the partnerships. As you can see, we've been creating partnerships, and there are lots of these that are already happening. They don't have to be with UNEP, UN Environment, my apologies, but also with regard to each other, people working with each other and coming to these partnerships, whether it's science and policy or science policy and business depending. So we have a very concrete agenda before us, and we hope that we will get the mandate to do this coming out of this meeting.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I do have to apologize. We have a head of state waiting for bilateral. But last question, okay?
Just short, but I mean, what will UNEA do with these decisions and resolutions? Do you take them to the General Assembly?
For sure, we will take a lot of these to other UN bodies, but let's have the realistic view of the world. The main decision makers in the world are the leaders of the nations. Next to that, it's business. Then, of course, citizens and civil society can put pressure on all of us. So the main audience is to make sure that key political decision makers in the world act. When, say, China or United States or India, when major, or for that matter, also smaller nations, when they act, that shows the world how to move forward. It's much, much more important than any kind of resolution or in process within the UN.
Eric, thank you very, very much. I know that your office is ready to take you to the next engagement. Ligia, thank you so much. There will, of course, be a press conference again with Eric and the President of the Assembly on Wednesday. Let me remind you all and welcome you also to attend the 2 tent talks this afternoon. Very exciting panels, one at 3 p.m. on space and emissions, one at 4:30 on environmental defenders.
2:15 environmental defenders.
I'm sorry, 2:15 for the environment defenders.
So Sudan environment launch as well, 4:30.
4:30 p.m. there is a report launch associated with South Sudan as well. Thank you all very much.